Can we get along together even if we have very differing views on different matters? Can we have a conversation to where we're focused on relationships rather than being right, rather than being argumentative, combative? Can we stop what I call voiceless, faceless communication by way of internet if it's starting to go south? Can we do this and try to create amicable relationships? Listen, and we'll learn how to do that. Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who is helping me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Philip Blackett. Very impressive resume, which includes a beginning in his early life of being autistic, but also for the first 4 years of his life, he was nonverbal. He explains to being nonverbal, and he is on the autistic spectrum, very articulate, very conversive, and has multiple degrees from Dallas Theological Seminary and Harvard Business School. Marty, what were some takeaways for you?
Philip is amazing, but I want to say I think all autistic children are amazing because they are very smart. And Philip shows this and tells about how his grandmother, his grandfather, and his mother helped shape him. They believed in him and they helped him go through the process of learning, which I would love it for all autistic children's parents to listen to Philip, because this is a learning lesson we have learned listening to Philip and his outstanding personality and how smart he is.
He's very articulate and a great person to learn from. Let's listen and learn together. Philip, it is great to be with you. I want to try to summarize, which is just a very brief part of your extensive resume for our listeners. You have a very extensive background. You've been with FedEx, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and Chick-fil-a. You have a Master's of Divinity from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, and you have an MBA from Harvard Business School and a bachelor's degree in political science and economics from University of North Carolina. In the context of North Carolina, you are an avid Tar Heel fan. I got to make sure our listeners know I am a Virginia Tech Hokie graduate, so we are natural rivals. In spite of that, we are each a member of the human race.
Right. And I just want to ask you real quick, was it Charlotte or where was the University of North Carolina?
Chapel Hill.
Chapel Hill.
All right.
Our
Yep.
daughter went to that school in Charlotte.
UNCC,
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
the
yeah.
Charlotte School. But Philip, gosh, you've got an impressive resume. And I'll tell our listeners just straight up, Marty and I are faith-based. You are as well, Philip. We don't hammer that, bang that at all, but that is the foundation of our beliefs in our life. But Philip, I'm very interested in speaking with you about, you mentioned life on the autism spectrum. And in the context of your book, Disagreeing Without Disrespect, How to Respectfully Debate with Those Who Think, Believe, and Vote Differently from You, I know sometimes the A word, autism, takes on a different meaning with different people. Certainly, ideological differences can cause various things to happen. With all of that lengthy intro, Philip, great to have you with us.
I'm excited to be here, Ron. Thanks so much for having me, Ron and Marty. I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you.
Philip, talk to us. Maybe start out life on the autism spectrum. Are you self-diagnosed, clinically diagnosed? How would you define autism with your life?
So I think for me, it probably would be more self-diagnosed that was validated and maybe confirmed with my own children. So I have two twin daughters. They're 7 years old now. And both of them were officially or formally diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. I kind of put two and two together, given the fact that when I was growing up, my mom told me that I was nonverbal until I was about 4 years old. I do remember going through occupational therapy classes before school. I do remember my grandmother making a huge investment in me over the summertime for me to try to catch up with the rest of my class. So I'd be more in the crowd versus more of an outsider. And I think even now with my wife, she knows me better than anybody else. She knows my particular social cues and quirks about me. And especially it kind of helps that she's a geneticist too, to pretty much confirm, hey, Philip, I do think there's a link between our daughters and you. So I would definitely say, for sure, more so than others, self-diagnosed autistic.
No, I appreciate that explanation. Did you feel somewhat of an outcast, not accepted? Did you have a challenge with relationships? Is that a part of the autistic spectrum?
I would think so, Ron. I think that even back when I look back at like early years, and sometimes I would go about, friendships differently, even like childhood crushes differently when I was much younger, that people would think, oh, that's cute. But then I look back at it years later and say, oh gosh, like what was I thinking during that time? The things I would do that I thought made sense, but for somebody on the outside be like, that looks kind of awkward. And so, yeah, I think it's one of those things that was something for me. I struggle with a good bit, wanting to not be the one that's, pointed out for something different or weird about me, but more so just want to be a part of the in crowd. And then later on, this whole sense of wanting to be a people pleaser played a role too, because now it was a sense of you didn't want to engage in conflict or confrontation. And so if there's a way you can dodge that by acquiescing to somebody else's desires or demands or wishes in that matter, even if it's, at your sacrifice, then that was something I was probably willing to do for sure.
Some people think, and for me, it is totally erroneous thinking, but maybe you're not employable. Some people think autism spectrum disorder has some correlation with a learning disability. I will tell you, Philip, with your very impressive background, the degrees you have, you dispel any image about any learning disability. You are an entrepreneur, you own your own business. It would seem to me, Philip, you have, I don't know if the term is correctly stated, you've overcome, you've leveraged whatever it is on the autism spectrum disorder scale. I'm trying to figure out just how you would characterize How is it you've become so successful when some people think those with autism are have a learning disability and they're somewhat limited?
Well, I first thank you, Ron. It's very nice of you to say. I think a few things come up top of mind for me. When I was growing up, autism wasn't seen in the same light as it is today. And I say that as a good thing today versus what was the case 20, 30 years ago. So oftentimes autism was labeled special education. There's a certain track for that. And just, hey, we just make the best out of that. And I think a big credit goes to my mother and my grandparents, in particular my grandmother, who was very much, you know, taking on time, resources, talent, whatever was necessary to intervene as much as possible at an early stage to help me not only catch up, but then spark a interest in learning for me that started to become more sustainable and more self-propelling and more of a game for me personally, as far as like how well I can do in certain fields of study and how far we can go with this. And so I think that plays a big role there. The other part I would say too, Ron, is, they call it autism spectrum for a reason, right? So you have a spectrum of where people find themselves, and there's two extremes, and then there's a middle ground, right? And so I think for me, when I was much older and started to get more into trying to understand what this is, and maybe I have Asperger's syndrome, maybe it's high functioning autism, because I'm very, very good at math, and that sort too. I think that's just part of just understanding like there's a variety of where you can go. At the same time, it's very instrumental and essential to have the right type of love and support unconditionally for those that are on the spectrum, because you don't know exactly where they are, and wherever they are, they still deserve your love and support and nurture to help them go to where they're trying to go.
I really appreciate two things, particularly you said love unconditionally and understanding. As you reflect on your earlier, maybe grade school, high school life, looking back and during those times, did you or could you now say that developmentally, maturity wise, or and by whatever criteria, you were a little bit behind some of your classmates?
Listen, if I wasn't speaking a word until I was 4 years old, it's pretty safe to say I was behind in a few areas. With that being said, yeah, I think part of it is that case. If you're not speaking until you're 4 years old, then you're having to catch up on a communication standpoint, right? And communication plays a big role as far as relationship building, making friends, sharing what you want. How does it play a role academically speaking? So I think that communication was really key, and how that translated into other parts of growing up as far as my development. I often say, even though my grandmother's no longer with me, she went on to be with the Lord a number of years ago. I would definitely credit to her that just the fact of me being here and speaking to you on this podcast the way that I'm speaking to you, compared to the long journey my grandmother and my mother and my grandfather went on with me way almost 40 years ago, is a huge testament on what God can do.
Was there an aspect of acceptance, your grandmother, mother, grandfather, your acceptance that helped you with, and I'm just supposing in this question, maybe at an earlier life you lacked some confidence?
Of course. Of course. I think the signal, the pivotal point for me, I think in my life was seventh grade, because I was at a point, middle school, adolescence, puberty, where you're trying to, you know, be one with the crowd. And you didn't want to necessarily stand out for a bad reason, but you didn't want to stand out for a good reason either. And I think that in particular with my grandmother, knowing that to her, I was her special package, where she told me oftentimes that God had given me everything I needed wrapped in one box with a nice bow on top. And that consistency really speaking that life into me and believing in me when I was trying to, you know, believe in myself in that standpoint. That's what fueled the fire for me to want to not prove her wrong. I wanted to prove her right. And I think that from seventh grade, just being in the middle of the class, not really caring too much about school, to eighth grade, being valedictorian in my class, taking on top academic honors in multiple classes, and then where that went from there, um, that was a pivotal point. And I owe a lot to my grandmother for that stamp.
I want to ask you, from the time when you weren't speaking, you were 4 years old before you spoke. How did they communicate with you, and what happened that you started speaking?
So at 4 years old, there's not much I really remember, to
Mhm.
be honest, right?
Mhm.
All I do remember is my mother and grandparents would tell me that I would just sit there and just smile at you. I wouldn't say anything, but I think that for them, from what I gathered from them, this was they kept on investing in me. They kept talking to me. They kept reading stories to me. They kept holding me, spending time with me, and that sort. It was just those certain things that made me feel comfortable with them versus other people. I think that played a role too, where I felt safe.
Mhm.
Are your daughters genetically very similar? Was there a period of time where they were nonverbal?
To some degree, I think what was helpful here was we got a good handle of what was going on at an early stage. And so we were able to find out what services were available for early intervention to help with that. Where now, if you looked at both of them, you probably couldn't tell that they're on the spectrum. I know I can because I can see certain parts of myself in both of them. But I think what was key for sure, Ron, was once we did get a diagnosis and having the help with my wife as well during this point, we really tried to see what resources and services were available. And we did our best to allot as many of those as we could provide for our kids so that they could keep up. And, this past school year was first grade for the girls. And so that was a huge thing for us because the previous year, obviously kindergarten, what's going on in my mind as a father is, are my girls going to be able to hang with the rest of the students? Are they able to do the activity so they can move on to another grade? I don't want them to just be moved up just out of pity. I want them to be able to merit the, hey, like they learn what they need to learn and they're ready to move on to the next grade. And so for me, just the fact that they were able to do that the first grade, going on to second grade this fall, was a significantly proud moment for me, just saying, hey, like I believe these girls are gonna be okay.
I love hearing what you say, and it's a lot of our belief. I mean, what I'm reading into what you're saying, Philip, is you had maybe at the top of the list was your grandmother, along with
Hmm.
grandfather and mother, who believed in you,
Hmm.
and you knew that, and that became a foundational principle, and you build on that. And as you said earlier, you wanted to prove them right that yes, you have a lot of value and whatever it is you are experiencing at the time, you're going to overcome and you're going to be somebody. I will tell you, Philip, you're very, very articulate. You have the degrees. For anybody who may think that, well, you're not employable, you are not a candidate for education, et cetera, and so on, it certainly seems to me like you are if I could use the word, poster child for the degrees and the fact that you're an entrepreneur, you've started your own business, but you, in hindsight, are self-declared, but yet there's a lot of evidence based on your testimony. You are living life, or you have overcome whatever that term may be on the autistic spectrum scale.
I appreciate it, Ron. Thank you.
Are your daughters somewhat misunderstood, set aside? And what I'm leading up to is your book of Disagree Without Being Disrespectful. I'm going to shorten the title. We can learn to get along with each other. But have your daughters experienced maybe any type of separation, non acceptance, whatever term, due to their autistic nature?
Not that I would say. I think that the classroom that they were in was very much supported from the teachers and the learning specialists and the behavioral specialists were very helpful working alongside myself and my wife to better understand both of our girls, both collectively and individually. And I think that, outside of just normal teasing amongst any kids in first grade, I would say no, they didn't experience anything out of the ordinary.
Okay, great. What was the impetus behind your book? Disagree without disrespect, how to respectfully debate with those who think, believe, and vote differently from you. Can you tell us what it was that motivated you to write about that book? And then let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So the origin story behind the book, Ron, was 4th of July last year. So, I live in Boston, and I invited my sister and her family up here, and we also had our mom come up here to visit. And so the adults were in the living room, and my sister and I, we were having a conversation. I don't know or remember what the topic was. All I know was is that we were on opposite sides of the topic. And so as we started to delve a little bit deeper in discussion, my mom jumps in. Now, it wasn't necessarily to jump on one side or the other. She was being the referee, but without a zebra shirt and a whistle. She basically said, listen, I know we got fireworks coming on later on tonight. What we're not going to do is have an early showing of those fireworks right now. And so while I appreciate her intent behind it, which was basically to preserve the peace and keep everyone going, we have a fond memory when we look back on 4th of July. The impact of it, though, was I felt like it was a lost opportunity. It was a lost opportunity for my sister and I, who don't see each other often. We're thousands of miles away from each other. And now we're present in front of each other. It was a lost opportunity for us to know more about each other, her to know something about me that was important, or me to know something about her that was particularly personal. Because I think, and you might agree with me on this, in the world of social media, smartphones, and text messages, some conversations are better to be had in person, face to face. And if you're not in a position where you can have that conversation, then clearly that conversation is not going to be had. And if you only have so much face to face time with somebody, then that means that's not going to be part of that relationship. And if you believe that the quality of our lives is oftentimes influenced by the quality of our relationships, then that plays a role too. And so I think that in reflection, after the 4th of July, I asked myself, I was like, well, if I went through something like that for me, I wonder how many other people around the world are going through something similar. Maybe they have a question that they've been wanting to pose for the longest, but they didn't because they were afraid they were going to rub somebody the wrong way. Or maybe there was something about them that was part of their story that they wanted to share with somebody, but they were concerned that if this broached some sort of disagreement, would things get awkward? Would things get nasty, or dare I say even violent? And that's what had me saying, okay, it's not so much disagreement that's the issue. It's more so the disrespect. And I feel like, compared to how I grew up, I feel like we've lost the rules of engagement on how we can go about disagreeing and still being respectful of one another. Because it's not disagreement that will break up a relationship, it's often disrespect that will. And so that's what had me say, okay, can I come up with some sort of framework that could be helpful for people that don't know how to navigate disagreement the way I did? And that's what came out to this book, as you mentioned before, Disagree Without Disrespect, How to Respectfully Debate with Those Who Think, Believe, and Vote Differently from You.
And I'm in total, what I say I believe Marty, and I don't want to speak for Marty out of turn, are in total radical agreement with you, everything you say. And we many times say that when you're having a conversation with someone who might disagree with you, which R is more important, to be right or to continue a relationship, or at least establish a relationship? And in the context of establishing a relationship, I think it's incumbent on us to spend more time listening than talking. And I'm the kind of person, Philip, and you may be as well. I welcome people who vehemently disagree with me because I know how people like me think. I want to listen to learn how other people think, but I'm going to ask them, why do you think that way? And I'm interested in knowing what their perspective is, their background, and so forth. I'm not necessarily here to try to influence them to think differently, but I do want to know the why behind why it is you think the way you do. And I'm not interested in, I'm going to approach you from the not part. I'm not interested in being confrontational or combative. I am interested in learning.
No, I think you hit on a great point, Ron. It's almost in a sense that there is a way we can approach it that is still influential, but it's not so much based on the words we actually say. Because just by actually offering to listen to somebody, hear the backstory behind why somebody believes the way he or she believes, what's the background behind it, ask clarifying questions to further understand someone where they feel like they're heard, that they feel like they can put down their guard around you and just be open and honest and even vulnerable. I think for me, that was one of those communication skills I learned in college that I realized there's a lot more here that can just be helpful just in college. This is something that can be helpful in life. And I think a lot of people are running around very much on the defensive because they're not so sure who they can trust to have these type of conversations. And I get it. That's why there's a lot of small talk being had. And speaking for myself, I'm not a small talk kind of guy. So I had to learn that I don't want to delve in small talk and just stay limited to that. So how can I help provide a setting for people where they feel comfortable going beneath the surface? And I think that's the case that a lot of people want to see and be a part of. It's just you don't know who you can trust in that matter.
I'm curious if you have a forum, and I totally agree with you about social media. I use the term frequently. Yes, we turn into keyboard warriors too often that I can do one-upsmanship, and the fact that I may denigrate you, hey, social media is largely faceless, voiceless, my term. But if we just take the time to want to understand each other and learn from each other, we all have different backgrounds, perspective, and so forth. But again, I want to learn about other people, and I know there are some who are radically different from me. And I'm not here necessarily. Okay, yes, I would like to persuade you to think a little bit different, but I can't make you do that. Maybe through association with us, you can see something positive in my life and the way we live. Maybe over a period of time of relationship, that could be a point of influence. But I'm not here to philosophize with you, Philip. I'm very interested in learning just how you deal with people. We're talking to you from Boston. I'm just guessing you are maybe surrounded by people who don't necessarily agree with your ideology, your framework. And again, Marty and I are faith-based as you are, and we may be in the minority in a group of people.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Ron. I think that that's not something I'm running away from. It's actually something I'm running towards. I think a quote that I try to keep top of mind for me was one that I read in I think it was the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And it was attributed to him saying, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
Mm-hmm.
And so why that's significant is the fact that, listen, there should be no reason for me to try to force anything on anybody, right? I'm much more um, in awe or in appreciation if somebody sees things from my point of view just from us having a conversation. I don't have to do any scare tactics. I don't have to threaten anybody. I don't have to put somebody down. I can just have an honest, fact-based conversation and no name calling. And still at the end of the day, even if it's something I don't convince that person right then and there, it just might be the approach I had, just the demeanor that may be more influential after the conversation than anything else that would lead someone to say, hey, I thought about what you said, Philip, and I like to have another conversation. Or I had a question. I'd be curious on your thoughts on this. And oftentimes it's keeping that door open, as I talk about often in the book, for continued conversation, because you hit it on the nail, honestly, Ron, that when it's more important for you to build a relationship versus trying to assert who's right and who's wrong, that's what's oftentimes going to rule the day for you, because oftentimes that's what's going to help somebody like come more to your side and be more open to what you have to say. And so I think that that's what's going on in my mind regarding that. I fully understand and expect that not everyone's going to agree with me on everything. And the reason why I say that is because, you know, I've been married for only 8 years. And my thought is that if me being married to my wife for the long term was contingent on us agreeing on everything, I'm here to tell you, Ron, we wouldn't have made it past the honeymoon stage.
I could have never guessed that.
We probably wouldn't have made it to the altar either, because wedding planning involves a lot of decisions to be made. And I'm pretty sure we probably wouldn't have agreed on everything. This we probably would have called off the wedding before the actual altar. So the thought that comes to my head using that example is, okay, marriage, the most intimate and most close of relationships God provided for us. If they can stand the test of time, these type of relationships, two people, two sinners, two imperfect, fallible human beings that are going to make mistakes, that are going to have different points of view, and you're going to disagree from time to time. If those same two people can stay together for 5, 10, 20, 30 plus years, in spite of those disagreements, what's the takeaway and lessons we can learn from that? Because I can imagine those same lessons of what keep those people together are the same type of lessons we can take note from that we can apply in our other relationships with people we're not spending the rest of our lives with.
You're right on. I will tell you, I feel as if I have some amount of credibility in saying what I'm about to say. Two people who can at times vehemently disagree with each other
Yeah.
can still remain married. September 7th of 2024, Marty and I will celebrate our 56th year of marriage.
Wow.
And I can tell you, Philip, the best is yet to come.
Congratulations.
Oh, no, that is all good.
It takes work.
And that's not a bad thing,
Mhm.
right? Like we were put on this earth to work. That was part of our duty. So work also goes into our relationships too.
Mhm.
Yes. Philip, maybe close out on this note, but you are a very articulate person, and I'm not here to patronize you. You are. And I'm thinking now that you were nonverbal for the first 4 years of your life. Was there some, maybe even decades, where you had to become the articulate, very congenial, conversive person you are, or did it just blossom naturally after overcoming your period of being 4 years of being nonverbal?
What I would say for you, Ron, is what you see is not just Philip. What you hear is not just Philip either. What you're hearing and seeing is essentially my mother, my grandfather, and definitely my grandmother. So at an early age, it was imparted to me that being articulate is a great thing. It's not a patronizing thing. If somebody compliments you on how well you speak, you say thank you. If someone compliments you on how neat you write, like actual handwriting, right? Not typing, you say thank you, because part of that was when my grandmother sat me on her lap and we had those blue and white handwriting tablets. And over the summer, she would just go over my print over and over and over again. So even though she's not here, for me to write the way I write and still get compliments to this day, it's it's a credit to her. For people that compliment me on how well I speak, given the fact that I started nonverbal, it's a credit to the people that invested in me back that time. So that's what I would say for my own kids. That's a part of the legacy I would like to continue among my family, just understanding that how important communication is. And yeah, I think it really came off the sense of like seventh grade. I think that's where things really changed for me. And part of that was, you know, let's see how well you can do in life by focusing on being a great communicator.
Philip, I want to ask you, and I know we're recording, I'm going to ask you if you might consider committing to another episode. We need to make known, not in a forceful way, as you quoted Dale Carnegie, we cannot force anyone to do anything they don't want to do. But I do believe our demeanor can be one of great, very positive influence. The more we interact with established relationships and are willing to listen, I believe we can overcome much of the animosity that exists within us as we purpose to establish relationships with other people. Would you consider another episode? And I can envision the possibility of even more than one more episode. How is it through our demeanor, our conversation, our relationships, we can develop friendships and we can overcome and not be combative, saying a lot of different things. We can learn how to effectively confront differences without being combative or confrontational. Would you be willing to come back and talk with us more about that?
Absolutely. I would love to.
I would appreciate that, Philip. I know, and we talked about it before we started this podcast, you are in the process of moving from Boston to further south. Maybe we would pick up this episode after you have made the move. But on behalf of our listeners, I want to sincerely appreciate your attitude, your demeanor, everything that you very possibly have had to endure to get to the point that you are of being an entrepreneur and a person who's accomplished a lot and a lot more yet to come. Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much, Ron and Marty, for having me here. I really enjoyed our conversation here.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life's experiences with you.
The Cooper culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and disc personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.